The jungle never forgets. Beneath the tangled green veils and the howls of distant beasts, time slips in strange directions. Roots strangle stone, and stone remembers blood. Deep within the Yucatan Peninsula, where the air is thick with moisture and the weight of forgotten gods, the earth hums with a presence older than memory. It begins with a shadow, long, coiling, silent, moving across the ancient carvings of Chichen Itza, not bound by flesh, but by myth. They called it Kukulkan, the Feathered Serpent, and in its coils it held not only the fate of a people, but the echo of something greater, something from beyond the stars. The Maya did not worship lightly. They did not build merely to touch the heavens. Their pyramids were keys, their rituals were locks, and their gods, never dead, only dreaming. When Kukulkan descended, it was not a tale for children, but a terror witnessed in open sky. A serpent, vast and luminous, slithering through the firmament, wings shimmering with impossible geometry. Elders knelt, priests breathed smoke, and the people gave what they had always given, red offerings raised in silence, iron on the air. There were nights when the moon was swallowed by obsidian clouds, and on those nights they opened the tunnels. Beneath the temple of Kukulkan, carved long before the outer stones were laid, passageways twist into the underworld. Not metaphorical, not poetic, but real, damp, guarded. The guardians were not soldiers. They were keepers who sealed their eyes and tongues with vows, sworn to live in the dark. They fed the tunnels with chants and offerings, keeping the serpent's resting place undisturbed. Or so they believed. At the apex of each equinox, the sun bled sideways, casting the serpent's illusion down the northern staircase of El Castillo. Tourists cheer and clap now. But centuries ago, this was not spectacle. It was a signal. When the serpent's shadow touched earth, the rites began. Incense thick enough to choke the soul, dancers in jaguar skins, obsidian mirrors catching the last light, chanting the name of Kukulkan, not as myth, but as plea. For in those days, the serpent was not gone. It merely slept, beneath stone, beneath time. The Maya knew the stars intimately. Their calendars were not superstition, but science wrapped in spiritual armor. In their codices, burned by conquerors, stolen by priests, there were drawings of the sky. Not just constellations as we know them, but instruments. Beings with eyes like black suns. And always, always, the Winged Serpent. Some called it Quetzalcoatl. Others knew it by older, unspoken names. But the image never changed. A presence descending, offering fire, demanding price. A visitor or a warden. Glyphs hidden in the depths of the pyramid reveal a serpent not as deity, but as memory. Something bound to human blood, guiding it, corrupting it, reshaping it. The attendants who served Kukulkan did not merely pray. They fasted until the world turned glass, then drank potions of ground obsidian and morning glory seeds, seeing visions of places where gravity bent like smoke and voices spoke in frequencies not meant for the living. Minds cracked open. In the rift, the serpent whispered, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, two names, one presence. Was it ever flesh, or was it something else? An entity that wore forms like masks, feeding on belief, shaping civilizations with its breath. The Olmec spoke of a feathered god who came from the sea, bringing knowledge. The Toltecs feared it. The Aztecs awaited its return. And the Maya built doors for it to come and go. They were not deluded. They were witnesses. The last, perhaps, who knew the cost of remembering too much. The most feared rite was not public. It hid beneath stone, performed only during black rains. They called it the offering of the serpent's eye. A young witness, pure and silent, was led into the heart of the pyramid, not to be harmed, but to listen. Deep in the earth, surrounded by glyphs that seemed to pulse with an inner glow, the child spoke in tongues never taught, repeating messages from stars long dead. And if the voice changed, if it became deep and vast and cold, then the keepers knew. The serpent was awake again. The echoes of that voice linger even now. Tourists climbing El Castillo sometimes hear it, a hiss that is not wind, a rumble that is not stone. Clap at the base of the staircase and a sound replies from above, sharp, metallic, uncanny, not just an acoustic trick, a reminder. What sleeps in the pyramid does not dream gently. One codex, barely saved from Spanish flames, spoke of a final return. The winged serpent would rise when the skies opened and the stone bled light. Scribes recorded a vision of cities burning, rivers reversing, stars blinking out one by one. Not destruction, they wrote, transformation, for the serpent does not punish, it evolves. Those who are worthy become more, those who are not disappear. The last recorded stirring of Kukulkan, they said, was not ancient. It was 1562, not in vision, but in sight. Witnesses described a luminous coil rising from the pyramid's summit as idols burned below. A bishop wrote of a demon in the sky, radiant and vanishing into the heavens, while screams echoed from caverns. The newcomers believed fire and steel could erase gods, but gods do not burn. They wait. And now, something stirs again. Earth hums louder near Chichen Itza. Animals avoid the steps. Strange lights trace lines where no modern path leads. In the jungle, stories return, old women whispering of dreams filled with feathers and fangs. Archaeologists find tunnels on no map, with walls too smooth, too precise, too cold. Something is waking beneath the stone, not a symbol, an echo of a promise. The serpent never left. It watches, it listens, and one night soon, beneath a blood-red moon, it will descend again, not as vision, but as verdict. The air grows heavy, as though the heavens themselves press down. Leaves trade secrets in breathless rustles around stones no hand has touched in centuries. Damp earth smells of vow and invitation. In the heart of the pyramid, something shifts, a memory coiling in bone-deep chill, yearning to wake. The carved serpents along the balustrades begin to pulse, not with life, but with a light that flickers like dying stars. Not enough to illuminate, enough to suggest scales folding, wings stretching, a tongue of smoke tasting the air. Here, stone is not silent. It breathes. It remembers every offering, every whispered invocation, every name surrendered to its veins, and it waits for the right moment, the final calling. Beneath, in the labyrinth of corridors, shadows take shape, not men or beasts, but robed figures hunched and silent. They do not guard. They are guardians, oath-bound, blood-sealed. Their vows stitch the mouth closed without thread. Obsidian masks dim the eyes to midnight. They exist only to ensure the serpent's rest remains unbroken, to keep careless words from stirring the dream. And yet they tremble in half-light, as though something restless presses a weight upon their hearts. At the center of the maze, an obsidian pool mirrors the void. Its surface is still and yet alive, rippling without wind. Those who dare to gaze see not reflections, but echoes of what waits beyond, feathered wings unfurling against black skies, rings of fire where no candle burns, cold eyes watching from distances that do not measure. The Maya spoke of the cosmic serpent, but this is not a story. They felt it in bone. They knew it was tied to cycles older than stars, older than Earth. They feared it not as destroyer, but as architect of transition, life into death, stone into breath, flesh into memory. For every blade raised, for every spiral of copal, they carved pathways in the veil, inviting the serpent in, always at a price. There was a night recorded in cracked pages smuggled through centuries, when the stars themselves seemed to shudder. Feathers fell, white, iridescent, wrong. They burned on contact, dissolving into smoke that sang in an old tongue. Witnesses were broken, some went mad, some vanished. Others became pilgrims, whispering the serpent's name until their tongues bled metaphor instead of sound. It was the sign, the world blinking, on the verge of folding inward. In dreams, it returns. A presence at the margin, no more than a hiss, a feather across the mind. Then a voice, thick and echoing, speaking of thresholds, of doors cracked open. The dreamer wakes, and the world is tilted. The hut walls bow inward. The air tastes of ash. A morning stone hums. The dreamer goes on, changed, carrying shapes behind the eyes that do not belong to human memory. Quetzalcoatl, a breath, a prayer, a lingering dread. Some heard it in the wind rising from jungle in low melodic tones. Others found feather-like scratches on smooth stone, lines that appeared overnight. No hand carved them. They were gifts or warnings. At the summit of El Castillo, when the sun reaches its apex, the serpent's shape unfurls anew. Lately, in rare alignments, the illusion feels more than shadow, shimmering, fluid, almost tactile. Children stare, still. Elders weep dry. It is a promise or a summons. The world below answers. Drums echo, jungle shudders, sky widens, as if preparing to receive. Folklore whispers of a chamber not beneath, but above, the sealed space in the pyramid's capstone where flame meets feather. A place where the serpent lingers between breath and silence, coiling around a single crystal, bright as a heartbeat. They say when the crystal dims, the serpent stirs. When it ignites, the world tilts. In the southern villages, old women sit by fires weaving tales that make embers crawl. They speak of children drawing winged serpents in dust at night, eyes of starlight. At dawn, the drawings vanish, and the children, gone, as though folded back into a dream. The women pray for forgetfulness. The jungle remembers. It whispers their names through leaves. There are whispers of tunnels newer than the pyramid, cracks where no hand carved, lined with bones older than burial grounds. Many avoid them. A few insist on entering and return with journals, speaking of sound, a low hum that travels through bone, a vibration talking before words, of murals painted with pigment, not earthly, of doors appearing where none were before, pulsing like veins of dormant lightning. The serpent is patient. It watches dates, marking cycles beyond calendars. Some still wait, cloaked in midnight at equinoxes and solstices, offering mirrors, drops of wine-dark libation, whispers of long-forgotten names. They call it return. They call it triumph. There is a cenote beyond the tourist paths, a round mouth of stone drinking sky. At night, its surface goes black as obsidian, a mirror that refuses to reflect. We lowered lamps on cords and watched the light shorten, as if something below ate brightness before it could reach the water. The air smelled of limestone and old prayers. On the rim, offerings lay from other centuries, jade beads dulled to river green, a blade the size of a palm, copal hardened into amber tears. I tied a rope and climbed down the wet ladder, cut into rock. The temperature dropped. The world narrowed to breath and echo. At the lip of the water, the hum began. Not loud, intimate. It gathered in the ribs and tapped each one as if counting. When I cupped the water, it trembled in my hand without wind. My lamp flickered. For a heartbeat, the pool showed not my face, but feathers, white and iridescent, drifting across a sky that fit inside a well. A ring of faint glyphs ran just above the waterline. I traced one with my finger and felt heat, the kind that belongs to sun or memory. Then the hum changed key and climbed my spine like a ladder. I left quickly, climbing back into a night that smelled of rain. Behind me, the cenote took a breath and exhaled a mist that tasted like salt and something older than salt. They pay me to talk about stones. I prefer to listen to them. On equinox days, I stand at the base of the northern staircase and warn people not to rush the steps. I clap once because they ask, and the stair answers with that bright chirp. Most phones record it and move on. Once, late, when the crowd thinned and the light turned honey on limestone, I clapped again. The reply came sharper, nearer, not from the step, but from above my head. It said my name. No mouth shaped it. It arrived whole, like a coin dropped in the throat. I tried to laugh, and it did not fit. In my pocket were copied notes from my grandfather, who said the staircase learns voices if you feed it patience. On my walk home, the leaves leaned in. My shadow lengthened in a direction that had no sun. I did not tell anyone. The next day, a child asked me why the pyramid purrs. I said, "It is the wind." The child said, "Wind does not remember," then clapped, soft, and the stair replied with a sound I have not heard again, not chirp, not echo, something like a feather cutting water. In a box too plain for its secret, a fragment rests, a page said to be copied from a witness of 1562. The ink has bled to brown, the edges eaten by climate. Between lines in cramped script, a hand has added notes in a steadier style. On the night when images were cast into flame, there rose from the upper stone a brightness, coiled in 3 turns, feathered like lightning. The air did ring as if struck. The people cried not with fear, but with recognition. A bishop named it demon. I named it memory. It climbed into heaven without wings. Those below heard a voice from caverns like the low of a bell that speaks words. In the margin, the steadier hand. If this is false, it is beautifully false. If it is true, the fire did not consume what mattered. The page smells faintly of copal when no one is near it. Tomorrow's horizon grows bright, not with dawn, but with haloed light, bending, refracting, turning into shapes too familiar to be coincidence. Serpents rising in haze. Within them, the shimmer of feather and fang. We are on the brink, every breath draws nearer. El Castillo stands sentinel, silent but sated for now. But its stones pulse, and the unseen serpent waits in shadow and noise, in dream and memory. One day, not far from now, its wings will part the sky, not as myth, as reckoning.